And today's speakers are Kristie Neve, born 1947 in Lansing, Michigan, car capital of the world. Kristie matured at a time when see the USA in your Chevrolet was part of the American dream. She never bought into the car maker's dream. Her personal independence began with walking to school. Walking has long been her preferred means of motion. Public transportation was an option. Bicycle culture hadn't really begun. Being a lifelong non-driver taught Kristie planning, logistics, and most importantly, compassion for the stranger. Today, being a non-driver never felt so hip. We'll also be hearing from Matthew Christen, immersed in the world of active transportation for many years with advocacy, as a nationally certified cycling instructor, a bike shop owner, director of Everybody Bikes, a UA nonprofit, a speaker. Matthew has bicycled over 25,000 miles around La Crosse in the last 20 years. Thank you both for sharing with us today.
Good morning. I want to start out with a fact for those of you who like to have a little information right at the beginning. Here's a city bus riding fact from the UCLA Transportation Guide. It's been reported that walking to and from a bus stop can provide you with a recommended 30 minutes of exercise per day, which helps support good health. Another aspect to bus riding, which I had never even considered what that might mean, but there's your 30 minutes of a quick workout. But now, back to where we are today. I just do want to thank Alyssa, the Sunday Services, and the Week Without Driving team for inviting me to present my experiences as a lifelong non-driver. In this all-consuming car culture, it hasn't really been easy. We know now that environmentally, we must reduce our dependence on the car. Matthew, my partner, will provide more insights in this area, as well as some more facts. This isn't a car bashing talk on my part at all. I'm here to remind you that we have transportation alternatives. I have been generously given rides by friends, you're out there, and I do try to remunerate when possible. Anyhow, as a non-driver, I've always found myself in the minority. It's only when in a large city that I find myself feeling more a part of the norm. According to the Pew Research Center survey in 2024, this is interesting, 10% of US adults, 10% are non-drivers. Out of that 10%, 4% use public transportation. We know public transportation availability, geographic location, and personal income impact our driving decisions. Also, for some people, there is the social stigma and attached to those folks riding the bus. And I think it was perfectly brought up in the last bus ride, or the last ride to Market Street. She captured that, or he captured that very well. And that social stigma piece is hard to quantify, it really is, but it's in play a lot. But at any rate, my life's journey has been shaped around the fact that I don't drive. I hope my talk will encourage some of you to think outside the car and maybe try taking the bus soon. And also, you could just take a walk. Here's another trip, ride trip, when going on the bus. And I think, again, it was brought up in that beautiful book, is that when you're facing inclement weather, it's cold outside, you got to walk that 10 minutes, whatever it is. I do tell myself, I convince myself that I think I'm going to have an adventure. I use that method as a positive way to get myself to the bus stop. And believe me, it has paid off. It will come out later. As many of you know, I was born in 1947 in Lansing, Michigan, car capital, not the car capital, but Michigan being the car capital of the US at that time. It was the provider of Michigan's economic success and our state development. And believe me, we were a wealthy, wealthy state at that time. And I also grew up, as it's been said, in the 50s and the 60s when it was really the way to get around. It was anyone who turned 16 was expected and socially expected to get your license. And it made it easy in Michigan because it was all free. It was so free. Public schools didn't cost anything for driver's education. We always had a brand new Oldsmobile, hot off the line. And for anybody, I'm sure I see young faces, Oldsmobile doesn't ring a bell to a lot of people. It has since gone. No more Oldsmobiles. But it was the centerpiece, really, of Lansing at that time. No, I really still didn't want to drive, even though it was made available to me. My mother pushed me. You had to have a car license. You have to. But I never got the car after I got my license. I just got the license. And my mother was 13 when she learned how to drive. I thought that was remarkable. I still do. And she was an excellent driver. But you're probably asking, what in the world has prevented you from driving? What's the problem? And this is it. I am terrified. I don't like the responsibility. I don't like the feeling of people coming up from behind. I call myself, I finally come up with it, I'm wheelophobic. That just made it easy to explain to people. I'm just wheelophobic, and that seems to work. Anyhow, of course, I do ride in cars, like my Amish friends, but I don't want to drive one. In fact, when I lived in Amish country, it was my Amish neighbor, Rosanna, who commented she couldn't believe I didn't drive, or I wanted to drive, or I didn't have a car. It just blew her mind. And she said, our bishop, it's not sinful for you. Why don't you? I'm wheelophobic. So it just didn't happen. It was always very funny. Actually, walking is preferred for my part. But I always walked to and from school, all the way from elementary to senior high. I became an observer of nature at that time and of our precious elm tree, may it rest in peace. And I learned to be a tree hugger at 5. It just made my life going through that nave of elms. But anyway, I have learned other methods of getting around. And that's when I moved from Lansing to St. Paul, Minnesota. I remained a non-driver. However, public transportation was everywhere in the Twin Cities. My destinations were longer, so I had to learn really how to ride a bus. It's something I had truly learned when living in Lansing. It is in this environment that I started using public transportation. I learned how to read bus schedules. We're going to talk about that later in the conference room if you want, and what a bus transfer meant, to ask questions and not to be afraid of the stranger. Because you have to ask a question once in a while. You have to find it'll be a stranger. Riding public transit systems has taught me to become patient. Waiting is part of riding. It's not a bad trait to develop. I can read, meditate, and just ponder the environment. Plus, I don't have to worry about finding a parking place. Learning how to chart where I was going and what time I was to arrive has been important. For you who would like some tips on reading schedules, after the service, my husband, Drew, has consented to help me in the conference room. We will be looking at bus schedules and the new transit app. And that's one that we all are debating how convenient it truly is. It would be good if you're going to start taking the bus to really look at that transit app. Ironically, now, 78, it's not so unique as we brought out. We elders don't drive, use the car like we have in the past. Lots of folks in my age range have eye problems, and they're fraught with all kinds of other worries when getting in the car, not to mention having your keys removed from you. So at this turning point in our lives, elders out there who may be thinking about other means of getting around, I will be happy to share some tips with you on riding the bus. But believe me, there are transportation options besides our public bus. We have Abbey vans, smart SMRT buses. That's a long distance bus ride you can take from, I think, Viroqua up here and back. There are explanations in a variety of places. If you want to know more, I can tell you. There are ways of getting around. There are also, here's the piece, intangible rewards as well. And I do need a sip of water. Excuse me. Several weeks ago, and this is the big one I want to share. Several weeks ago, I was on a city bus going to an appointment in Alaska. While I sat near the front, I always do, a large man in his 70s wearing a Vietnam veteran cap got on. He was in his 70s. Oh, I said that. He was driving a mega, he was a large man and the biggest mega motorized wheelchair I have ever seen. He was brought up, he got on the bus, but it was hard to maneuver this wheelchair around. It was, in fact, a different bus. It was a new bus. And he was carrying a package. He was trying to maneuver around the front. And at the same time, I thought, oh, maybe I can help. And I stood up. I said, can I take your package? He said, oh, sure, take the package. And the driver was behind him trying to get him in place. And it was all a group effort. We all tried, and he finally got it parked. And the bus driver apologized. He says, it's a brand new bus, first time out. So, and he was very calm. He was very kind. And there wasn't any sense of urgency that this fellow isn't getting on the bus. And that doesn't happen here. It's never happened to me, witnessing riding the bus. But anyhow, had to give that plug to the MTU. And it all worked out. Later now, I'm riding back to La Crosse. Who's on the bus but the veteran? We warmly acknowledge each other, and then another guy in an electric wheelchair gets on. Okay, seems these two men know each other. We have a little community growing, and we all cordially chat between each other. So we're all chit-chatting. However, before I jump off, the veteran smiled, and he looked straight at me. And he said, I'm a very lucky man. I have everything I need. I'm a happy fellow. And I don't need more. Goodbye, friend. At that moment, what went through my body, my spirit, was an undefinable sensation of connection. Something transcendent happened. Why did he choose me to tell? I don't know. The encounter has not left me. I have several experiences like that in buses, but they are rare. What began as an ordinary need to get someplace became a transcendent moment. Something I can't experience in a car. My walk home from the stop to my door was like I levitated. It was filled with unfettered happiness. I thought, oh, I've got to tell this to somebody. I've got to tell somebody. Little did I know, it was going to be you. Thank you.
In 2017, at the age of 61, I went on a new adventure, opened up a bike shop, retail, left the classroom, middle school classroom I was working in, and that was definitely a life-changing, what the heck am I, take a jump, a leap of faith moment. Definitely out of my comfort zone. You members, guests, Alyssa and Kristie, the concept of moving your tent stake is not new. Moving our cheese, right? For those of you who remember that whole concept, that idea constantly lingers around us, just kind of urging us to find that little piece of rope to move our tent stake just a little bit further. In 2006, the first time I actually ever owned more than one bicycle, I decided to commit to bicycle commuting with it. For all intents and purposes, and I didn't really know it, but that step ushered in an identity crisis for me. Now I'm riding to work, I'm doing all these things by bike, and all these questions start coming at me like, oh, aren't you cold? How far do you have to ride? I could never ride that far. Why don't you drive? Are you crazy? I mean, the questions never seem to end, even today after 20 years, almost 20 years later. So the idea that there are many reasons for someone to drive a bicycle rather than a car: health, economy, global warming, and self-fulfillment. Those are just a few. Health is a big issue. We have a society that sits a lot, sedentary. In 5 short years, our country is going to have over 50% of its population overweight or obese. And that causes us a lot in exchange. It's $175 billion a year in the healthcare costs that conspires. So mobilizing our bodies for health is something we can do actually quite easily, because the most significant trip in our country is 1 to 2 miles. We take 1.3 to 1.4 trillion trips a year in our country, and out of that, almost 70%, somewhere around 68 point something, are 2 miles or less. That's over 700 billion trips that are 2 miles or less. Out of that, 26%, or about 300 billion trips, are 1 mile or less. We can do that. We can take care of those short trips. When we're active and we're mobile, our well-being is improved, our outlook improves, our emotional health is more stable, we become more productive, life is better. People on bikes or walking, they also meet more people and are more social, which is one of the top 3 conditions for a healthy, long life, is having some of that interaction. I think Kristie described it really well. It doesn't have to be on a bike. It could be walking, it could be on a bus. Economically, active transportation has fingers all over the place. And it's helpful for us to understand that it's a huge economic impact as well. One of the causes of homelessness or unshelteredness in our world is affordable housing. It's the number one issue. And so when you look at the cost of owning a car, transportation in a low-income or poverty family is 40% of their budget. And if you understand that owning a car in the United States is equal in value, owning and operating a car is equal in value to the mortgage payment on a $200,000 home at 4% interest over 30 years. That's what it costs us to drive. Another way to look at that is it's 72 cents a mile. So if you drove here today and you drove 10 miles, That's actually $7.20 that it costed you. And so we have to understand that we should really learn to really understand what it costs us to operate our vehicles. Bike infrastructure itself is part of our economic structure. When you put a bike lane, it's not just a bike lane, it's also a means for most retail and other businesses and restaurants, it improves their net income by 3 to 49%. It improves our neighborhoods, all right? So the infrastructure alone can make a big difference. Over 50% of the commuters in our country earn $25,000 a year or less. You know, when you understand that that's a significant, transportation is a significant part of lower income families. And so what we can do to support that, take the stigma away, help make a place for that, we're providing more of that equity. And I learned that a lot when I work with Everybody Bikes people that come my way. They've taught me, you know, the amount of transportation that it makes a difference in their worlds. But one person in particular, this person came to me shortly after they moved to the La Crosse area. And, you know, when we had our first session, he said to me, Matthew, you're not just giving me a bike, you're giving me hope. And I really didn't understand that, honestly. And so, you know, I saw the person off and on for over about a year. And one day it came into the shop and said, Matthew, I want to take you to lunch today. And I knew this person really couldn't afford it. And I said, well, what's the celebration? And he said, when I first came here, I was on 16 medications and I had a prognosis that a lung problem was going to kill me. He said, that prognosis is gone. And today, as of today, I'm down to 4 medications. Yeah, it was definitely worth celebration. But he attributed it all to the life changes he made by getting on a bicycle. And so we can do that too. Global climate impacts are out there. Transportation is steadily on the rise. We're not taking fewer trips. But understand that each mile that you don't drive a car or do, it's 1 pound of CO2 going into the air a mile, okay? So if you choose not to, you're saving a pound, and if you choose to, you're putting a pound out there. So when I bought my second bike, my principal learned that I was gonna pay for that bike. It was how I sold the whole idea to my wife. But the idea was to get that $850 back and equated just to the gas issue, I had to ride 7,525 miles. And so I did, and every week the principal would change that up on the chart in the office. But what was unique was that every time I reached 2,000 miles, I had a 1-ton party in my science classes just to convey to people. And we could do that here too. We could wrap this place with all the miles that all the CO2 we're not putting into the air. So we have a 1-ton party. Understand that 1 gallon of gas is about 8.5 pounds. But when you put it through a combustion engine, it turns into 20 pounds. And most of that is CO2. So understanding that, you know, in the world of chemistry, you know, I'm sure there's people who could explain that better than me. But burning fossil fuels is a serious issue. It's 29% of our total emissions and the #1 cause of global warming. Now, to bring a different perspective in, Kristie talked about the driving. Millennials today are the first generation. 50% of 16-year-olds are not getting driver's license. Millennials bought 20% fewer cars than any generation before them. And the research that has come out of that is that they really didn't like all those trips made from the suburbs into wherever they were going all the time. But they also learned that they could do social media, talk on the phone, read a book, do some homework, whatever, instead of driving a car. And buses provide all of us with that same opportunity. Understanding that their kind of rebellion against driving was to not want to use a car and live in a place where they don't have to. It's completely changed our whole approach to urban design, because if you're going to attract those people to your city, you need to have ways to get around than just driving a car everywhere. And so our transportation over the last 80 years has done nothing but encourage more urban sprawl and driving farther and farther. So as passengers on this boat called Planet Earth, we need to embrace bicycling as a form of transportation, not a recreational endeavor. We need to move our tent stakes. We need to do something and avoid nothing. You know, set your own personal goal. Park a little further away and walk a little more distance. Shut your car off and avoid letting it idle. Can you get a ride with someone once in a while? You know, our comfort zone is a part of our identity, right? I mean, who hasn't thought to themselves, oh, that person's driving such and such a car. They must be such and such wealthy or whatever, right? You know, our whole sense of success is tied to what kind of a car we drive sometimes. So we need to attack that image. We need to embrace the fact that it is a little bit of an identity crisis to hop on a bus, to walk, to ride a bike somewhere, because, you know, that's not the norm these days. But being resilient, you never know what can happen. I had an 81-year-old customer that came in, was super tired of, had gained like 60, 70 pounds in their 60s and 70s, could barely walk from the car to the counter, not real stable. And so purchased an adult trike with pedal assist, electric assist, took it to their house, just started going around the driveway, and then up and down the alley. And then after a few weeks, around the block. Within 6 weeks, I mean, this person is one of my personal heroes. After 6 weeks, was now riding bike to the grocery store and getting groceries and coming home. Think of that sense of fulfillment, right? Our country has always had a certain element of an indomitable spirit, a willingness to use our ingenuity to figure out and solve problems, resiliency. We have it to take steps to change and curb our fossil fuel consumption. Remember, do something, avoid nothing, move a tent stake, no matter how small.